Hello, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. I'm Carolyn Eberly, and I'd like to introduce Heather Reed. She's going to be a teacher trainer in my certification program this year, and she's a graduate of Mind Energy Body School of Transformation, and she's also in other schools. She's getting her master's in counseling. So welcome, Heather. How are you today?
Hi, Carolyn. I'm good. How are you?
So glad you can join me. So basically, I wanted to do this webinar because I'm asked these common questions over the years about the pains of living in this world, trying to be a spiritual being, living in integrity, but we run into difficulties that can bring us out of our center, that can disconnect us from that spirituality within us and can cause problems in our lives. So I thought Heather and I could just have a conversation about some of the clients I've worked with, some of the challenges she's had, and just share this information with y'all. So welcome. I'm so glad you've joined us. So Heather, one of the most common questions I get asked tends to deal with relationships. We are, after all, humans are pack animals fundamentally. We are supposed to live in community, have a tribe, and not everybody has found their tribe. Not everybody was born into the family of their ideal tribe, and that can create hardships for them in their life. Have you faced any of those challenges? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Um, in a sense, I found pretty young that I wanted to do spiritual seeking, so I did find sort of, a meditation tribe that I felt I belonged in, even though it was dysfunctional. But, overall, what I've been hearing a lot is that people do want to be in relationship, and then they're just not sure how, how to be in a healthy relationship. Is what I hear a lot from people, because you're saying a lot of clients come to you about relationships. So
yeah. So when you found your meditation tribe, you ran into some problems, right? It turned out not to be your true tribe.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely, I think at the stage of life that I was in, it was the true tribe, but I changed, right? And so because it was because it was so dysfunctional, as I learned more me-be skills, then I actually kind of altered out of that tribe.
Right, right. So we can find out that our tribe is our tribe for a period of time, and then when you have a spiritual awakening. So just to explain to those who are used to me-be skills, me-be skills stands for mind, energy, body skills. The work I teach is mind, energy, body transformation, or me-be works. And you learn all these awakening skills. And what happens is who we thought was our tribe can change, right? And that can be painful process.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of people who have done the me-be training have experienced that, because they do. They begin to embody, a higher consciousness, a higher vibration, and then suddenly you can become out of step with all the other people in your life. And so that can be a real hardship to have to go through, and realize that people, in some sense, do have to meet you where you're at, or not, as the case may be, right? So, but yeah, so finding a tribe, finding one's place, it's a hard thing, and it can change. But I think ultimately people that want to do the me-be transformation work, they want change in their lives,
and they're ready for that change.
Whether it's to find a tribe that fits them, or
right. And when you get ready for the change, it is quite common for you to experience a situation where you outgrow your current tribe. And so what happens is, an example is, puzzle pieces fit together, but if one puzzle piece changes, then you no longer fit together. And so that can be a painful process. So let's give the folks who can probably relate to this on some level, some ideas of how do you deal with that transition. In spiritual terms, they would call that the void, where what you had been doing no longer works for you, but you haven't transitioned to a new set of friends or a new tribe. And that in between land is the void, and it can feel overwhelming. It could make you doubt yourself. It can bring up feelings of feeling like you're all alone. It can bring up feelings that you're not good enough or that you've made a mistake. And so those are all really good emotions to learn how to transform. So one of the things that I do with clients to help them transform that feeling of aloneness, that feeling that they no longer fit into their current situation, to actually have the courage to jump into the void before the new thing has been formed. It can be a job, it can be a relationship, it can be a community, as you were saying, your meditation community. So one of the things is the ego tends to get really reactive, and it can make you feel out of your center. It can make you feel unsafe. So one of the techniques I teach in the MeBe training is connecting to an inner source of safety, right? So
yeah, and I think that's a big question for people, because even in like a personal relationship, so many people don't have that internal source of safety.
So let's give them some tips.
I think that's a big part of your training, because there's going to be a lot of changes happening in people's lives. And so there does have to be something besides the ego.
Right. So if you are, one of the things I teach people for their safety is you are not your ego. Do not let your sense of self be defined by your ego. And that ego gets programmed by the limbic system, that midbrain, and the primal brain underneath. And it can shut off the higher brain functions and your connection to your spiritual wholeness. So if your ego defined your sense of worth, that void you may never jump into to create the change because it's too scary. So we teach.
Don't you find, Carolyn, with clients, that's one of the biggest challenges at first, because people, they think the ego is all there is. I mean, I see it over and over again.
And then
so that would have to be a big question.
Right. So one of the first things I do with a client or with a friend or a student, and what we do in the trainings, is we teach people to discover who they truly are, their core being, sense of self, their spiritual wholeness, their higher self. We teach them how to anchor into their higher self. And those 5 steps I teach in the training. Step 1 is to assess whether the ego's in charge or whether you're connected to your sense of self, your higher sense of self. I call it the core being. You guys can use whatever word you want. But that's kind of the most important skill set, lifelong skill set for long-term success, is can you differentiate between your ego-based sense of self, ego-based programming, and who your higher sense of self is. And then the other skills we teach is how you self-regulate back to that higher self. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think that's a critical step in the MeBe process, because as you said, if they can't assess where they're coming from, it's very difficult to then continue on the next steps, or to jump into the void, or to have that sense of safety and security, or to have something that's going to counterbalance addictions. So, I think that you spend the first part of the MeBe class. I know when we do the 12-month class, you spend four lessons.
The first 4 classes.
Differentiating and coming into core being versus ego.
Yeah. And in the Secret Code online training, the first 4 modules give them techniques on how to anchor into that true self. And then that brings up the issue of loneliness too. So if you've lost your current tribe, outgrown your current relationships, or some of them, it can feel lonely. So how do you overcome the loneliness? So the answer to begin with is definitely don't let your ego define you. Because I also teach 5 spiritual laws, and spiritual law number 1 says your sense of self creates your reality. So if your ego is creating your reality, you're going to stay in that void, in that middle chasm of pain, and you won't create that new life for yourself, that new puzzle pieces of higher vibration to fit together. So if you want to overcome loneliness, you have to find I call it be kind to your human. You have to learn how to send love and kindness to those ego-driven sense of self parts that can hold you down, that can do negative self-talk, and really, really multiply the pain. So one of the things I teach in the trainings and the online classes is how do you be kind to your human? We even have a website, bekindtoyourhuman.com, and a blog posting on my website, mindenergybody.org, where you can actually sign a petition at the bottom of the blog posting saying you agree to learn to be kind to your human. Because if we are beating ourselves up for being lonely, if we're self-doubt and questioning ourselves versus assessing, right? We do need to assess what changes we need to make in our life, what healing needs to happen. But if we assess with a mind that's vibrating at that pain, we're going to get more pain. But if we assess from this divine love we're giving to our human essence, then we can heal the loneliness, raise our vibration, discover where our saboteur is, and create something better, right? You've kind of gone
I'm
through
sure
that.
a lot of clients must come to you and say, oh, I've tried this, this, and this. And since you mentioned the saboteur, I mean, maybe give a little definition of the saboteur, because I think a lot of people honestly, genuinely feel that, oh, I'm really trying to change, right? But then something just keeps happening over and over again. So, a lot of times, spiritual work, we say the saboteur. So how do you see the saboteur, and then what does the Me-Be training, how do you address that issue in the Me-Be training?
Great question. Really great question. So everybody has a saboteur. It's not if you have a saboteur, it's assessing what is your saboteur. Because as long as there's higher vibrations to bring in, there's always something we can heal. I say we're never done because there's always more light to embody. So the best way I feel is to call the saboteur is to detach a little bit from your sense of self being the saboteur. I guess that's step 1. Because if you are defined and your value is defined by your saboteur, if there's not a little space, breath, vibrational difference between you assessing what the saboteur is, you'll just have more saboteur. In fact, that's also a great definition for a saboteur. The saboteur is the vibration that's running an unhealthy program in your mind, energy, and body system that's based on old negative habituations. Usually it's based on a young trauma or a past life trauma or ancestral lineage trauma that gets you set to respond in a certain way in certain circumstances. In trauma work, we call them orienting reflexes, where you actually orient to repeat the painful past. So your saboteur is the part of you that is actually repeating a negative pattern over and over again, but it's part of the subconscious. You're not yet aware of it because you haven't claimed enough of your wholeness. So, self-identifying as the core being is essential. Step 1 of the 5 steps I teach. Detachment is step 2, which is essential, is their space. So that there's a difference in your vibration of mind that's assessing the saboteur. If you assess it from your wounded self, you're going to get more wounded self. If you assess it from your higher self, there's space, there's vibrational frequencies to change. Everything is made out of particles of energy, And it doesn't have to be a solid reality. If you assess from the particles of higher consciousness your saboteur, you can transform your saboteur. So yes, the saboteur is essential to identify and transform, and you get wonderful skills in our programs, either online or in person, or even weekend training events. Free tip blogs. I do a Sunday morning meditation, awakening video for all of you. So you don't have to do paid support. You can get some free support too, guys. So yeah, I would say healing the saboteur is huge. That was a great question.
I was trying to think also, what would you say, because we talk maybe about the things that are holding back clients. What are those things that you find that clients bring to the table that really helps them in the MeBe program?
Resiliency. You know, there's a part of them that intuitively knows there's a better way. They're longing for a better way to do their life. They're longing for self-mastery skills. They're longing for a better relationship, a more abundant private practice or personal life that is more fulfilling. They have an emptiness that they know can be filled. So that positive optimism of how, asking the question how, people willing to ask questions, people who are open to learn a new paradigm, I think really launches them on another level that is quite healing and is quite profound.
Go to that beginner's mind.
Yes,
Right?
yes, the beginner's mind. Yeah. Yeah, the beginner's mind is miracles happen with the beginner's mind. I actually, in your B2 class, I actually taught meditation on how to reawaken the beginner's mind. Yeah. So I think the people that question that they have to feel pain in the same old way, I think people that question that am I really bad? Am I really wrong? Or how can this difficulty lead me to an awakening? I teach pain. Emotional pain is the energetic portal to awakening. So the students that, or the individuals out there that are willing to ask the question, wow, how can I feel pain in a different way where it actually creates healing, where it creates positive manifestation? Because, you know, they've done these studies, and because they can do MRIs of the brain, the place in the brain that feels physical pain is the same place that feels emotional pain. And there is a better way to address our emotional pain and to address physical health and to manifest those great things. Yeah. What other questions do you think are pivotal? We've got about 10 more minutes. Let's talk about some other questions that people might find pivotal.
Let's see.
One of the things that...
Do you...
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead. I was just thinking out loud, so go ahead.
So self-care. I think the question around self-care. How do I know if I'm taking good enough care of myself? I find for many people who will be watching this are often caring people, very compassionate people, care about healing and helping others. And so much of our energy goes out to assisting others that we can do it at our own expense. I know that is definitely a work in process for me personally.
Don't you see too, like there's a lot of spiritual teachings out there where it's all about other people.
Right.
You know, you're not a good person unless this is all for others.
Yes.
You know, I mean, seriously, that it's like a thing, but I see so many people that they're like all about focusing on the others, but they still haven't, embodied their wholeness and are being kind to their own human before that they're giving out to everyone else.
Yeah, what do they say? Put the life mask on yourself before you put it on the others. And I think that's true in spirituality work, because I've had clients come in and say, listen, I can't get angry. It's not spiritual to be angry. And I said, well, as long as you have a primal brain and a limbic brain, you're going to get angry. So you might as well learn how to deal with the anger and transform the anger to power. There is a way to connect to anger that transforms to power. And it's important to really know that anger is a messenger. It's not bad. Let's not judge anger. It's a messenger usually saying you need to say no, or you need to set a boundary, or you're giving too much. Many of us will give, and then we'll just blow up in anger. And that's not helpful either. That creates more pain. That spreads. It's a form of defense. So I say, instead of just the power of now, what about the power of no as a spiritual practice? Sometimes saying no helps you say yes to yourself, set proper boundaries, and move out of codependency. I think that's the other thing I'd like to get out there is so many of us think, and I used to too, if I do for them, if I stop doing for them, they'll fall on their face. I'm talking about adults, not kids. And I said, well, if you stop doing for them, they get to find the power to start doing for themselves. And even with kids, I've got a 24-year-old, almost 25-year-old, and a 22-year-old. So over the years, I had to stop doing for them and have them reclaim more of their power by starting to do for themselves. But oftentimes, wives will say, oh, I have to help him do this, or help her do this, or my friend will suffer. And I'm like, well, maybe they need to suffer in order to find the power. Suffering is not bad or good. It's how we suffer that creates the healing. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, all that resonates with me, of course. And also, people looking into your programs, I really want them to realize that this is not about spiritual bypassing these feelings. And because, just myself, looking through the internet and various teachings and things that people are doing, a lot of times they want to bypass the anger. And they fall into that whole, judging, we're just going to be so spiritual. We're not going to actually look into, these difficult feelings and the pain of living.
Yeah, I think one of the most painful examples of a client doing spiritual bypass, or what I call it spiritual junk food, is when this client who was a yoga instructor, and she really felt anger was wrong, was bad. When she was a child, she was traumatized by anger. And so she was like, I cannot go to anger because I was so traumatized by anger. And that's a really common story I hear. The problem is that afternoon, instead of speaking what she was angry at to her boyfriend, instead of really owning her anger, I got a call that evening after she refused to do any work around anger, and she had ran over her boyfriend's foot with a car. She was that angry. So I think there's harm that can come from not owning our human aspects, our limbic aspects, the part of our brain that gets reactive. And what I'm so passionate about helping you learn, whether you learn from my program or another program, is learn how to self-regulate your limbic system, your primal brain. Rick Hanson calls it the higher brain, the monkey brain, the midbrain, the limbic brain, the mouse brain, and the primal brain, the reptile brain. So in this short space, you have a monkey, a reptile, and a mouse living and trying to interact together. So no wonder we have war. No wonder we have a crazy Congress that can't do anything, because people are living from their defensive, ego-based programmed reactivity and not their higher, bigger CEO that
And
that is
and
aligned.
don't you see too? I think a lot of clients or people that want to do the online training program, they could ask about this emotional dysregulation because this is a huge issue. I mean, I can't imagine. There's just so many people being diagnosed as bipolar right now, and way more many women than men. My husband and I were just talking about this issue the other night, and I'm like, is it, what's happening? Is it bipolar? There's just this ton of emotional dysregulation that seems to be happening in our world right now. And maybe it's just, all the pressure of life. But I think this is a huge issue for clients or anyone who could be taking this program.
It is a fundamental issue, and the fact that you are so clear in admitting it's a fundamental issue in people's lives and in your life and in my life is kind of the first step, because there are so many people out there that won't admit it. I was giving a training to a small group, and there was a person into this one type of what I would call a short-term kind of spiritual junk food approach, and she announced that she never had emotional dysregulation, and neither did her son or her husband, and they did not need the talk. And she had a huge emotional dysregulation outburst and walked out the door. And I'm like, okay, so denial is not only a river in Egypt. There's so many of us caught in denial that it really holds us back. And I get why we want to deny our emotional dysregulation. I get why we want to deny our imperfections. Because if we don't know who we truly are, if we don't know how to be kind to our human and do self-love, there's no choice but to deny. So that's why I'm so big in teaching, how do you self-love? How do you self-identify as your bigger self and use your ego as something that you transform instead of let define who you are. Yeah. So the other issue I find people talk about is money. They need more money. There's not enough money. I so understand that, and they want money. And
there's a lot of baggage with money. I mean, there's many spiritual people who then put down money because, it's not pure or holy, or I don't know, but, being stressed about paying the bills and not having health care or taking care of your children, I mean, that's not a good thing either.
Right. Or there's the student that quits the IBM job because they want to follow their passion, but they don't have a financial plan, and they don't have a transition, and then they end up poor and angry and feeling overwhelmed because they're out of their window of tolerance. In trauma work, when you put yourself in such a stressful situation, you become out of your window of tolerance. You can't self-regulate because it's too intense. So having a financial plan is really, really important. Not being afraid of receiving money is really important. I know that my father got money, had lots of money, but got it through a very defensive, unhealthy way, and reacted in a very unhealthy way of controlling, manipulating, attacking via money. His sense of self was related via money. So yes, I guess I'm out there to say you can use ego and defense to get a ton of money, but you probably won't be happy. Or maybe that's not my way. I want to get money. I want to no longer be afraid of receiving money, which honestly, I in my teens and when I first had kids, I pushed away money because I just wanted to save the world. I was one of those people. And then I wised up and I healed my negative belief systems around money. So I really encourage everybody to write, what are your negative belief systems around money? Where do you feel in your body? There's this energy line that I teach in my practice called the intention line. Barbara Brennan calls it the horror line. And you can feel the intention line. In fact, let's end with that. Kind of feel there's a line, an energy dimension coming from the top of the head through the center of the body, called the Har line on Barbara Brennan. It's the attention line, and it feels like two magnets pulling us, this grounded energy. So kind of close your eyes and think about, I feel aligned to receive a lot of money. And just notice if your body likes that. And if not, what do you imagine is the negative belief or sense of self that gets in the way? And then work on healing that. So on one
I'm
level,
sure many clients come, and in our MEV group too, there were a lot of people who just felt that they weren't in the right job line. They weren't happy with the money they were making. And in some places, like counselors, they were actually really being taken advantage of. Part of that caring for others, but not receiving. I mean, that all revolved around
not charging enough, feeling burnout in the communities. Yeah. And honestly, after the MEB program, their practices doubled. They were making more money. They got the jobs they wanted. And in part, they did this work. So guys who are watching this, kind of see if you can feel, where do you hold your negative beliefs in your body and energy system? What needs to transform? And then use our trainings and our free resources. And you can do a free 20-minute consult with me too. And we can help figure out what are your money issues and what needs transformation. Because we all honestly deserve to be abundant. There's enough wealth here on earth to share. And you don't have to get money through defensive reactivity or avoid money because you're spiritual.
I think looking at money, personally, when I work with my clients, I look on money, it is an energy, and it's almost a representation of power and personal power. So looking into people's finances and the work that they're doing, and most especially how they relate to all of that, can be very indicative of how they're running their energy and how much they've been working on the 5 steps.
It's very diagnostic is another way. Your relationship to money is diagnostic on whether you're working the 5 steps, whether you're using those 5 spiritual laws to support you, and whether you're really anchored into your true self. Money is a great way to assess your saboteur, right?
Right. Right. It is. It really is.
Cool. So we've kind of come to the end of our time together. Again, I want to just give you a shout out. Feel free. I'll give you a link for a free 20-minute consult. I also have a wonderful online program, The Secret Code to Spirituality in the Practical World. It helps you come with those self-mastery skills to help yourself. And if you're a practitioner, it's amazing at helping others as well. I have a book. I realize my book is right here in the background. It's on Amazon. It's called The Explorer's Mind, A Map to Freedom. And I'm offering an in-person 12-class certification program in mind, energy, body transformation. It covers all these self-empowerment skills. You also learn how to work with chronic illness, cancer, trauma, how to assess adult consciousness, how to heal your 5 seeds of distortion around relationships, how to heal child consciousness, birth trauma, how to discover who you really are. And it covers all the 5, really getting the 5 skills, 5 steps, and 5 spiritual laws. Also on sexual energy it talks about, right? Anything else you would like to add, my dear? You love the program. Heather's going to be a teacher trainee in the program this year.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking, I completed the MEB 1 training in 2013, and just checking in with all the people who are in that group. So it's been 2 years now. It's pretty amazing. And it's just, and it's to you and the work that you've developed that people can transform their lives.
Cool. All right, guys, stay in touch. Blessings, lots of love. Talk to you soon. Bye.